ICQ Podcast, episode 477, ARRL Bylaw 46 changes. Well, hello fellow amateur radio enthusiasts, and welcome to episode 477 of the ICQ Amateur Radio Podcast, supported this episode by our monthly and subscription donors. In this episode, we'll join Martin M1MRB, Dan Kilo Bravo 6 November Uniform, Caryn KD2 Golf Uniform Tango, Edmund Mike 0 Mike November Golf, and Ed DD5 Lima Papa to discuss the latest amateur radio news. Myself, Colin M6BOY, rounds up the news in brief, and this episode's feature is a look at the Bylaw 46 changes at the ARRL. Well, as always, it's your very kind support and the way you show value for your ICQ podcast that keeps us running and advert-free and producing for you every fortnight. And we'd like to continue to thank our monthly and subscription donors for everything they do to help us pay our way. If you find value from today's show, we ask you to consider us with a financial contribution by visiting ICQPodcast.com/donate. Well, as I say, the best way to do it is turn the show and the value you got from it, the enjoyment, etc., and the entertainment into a monetary figure and send it our way, and it'd be greatly appreciated and go towards our future running costs and keeping your show advert free. So say go to ICQPodcast.com/donate. And also just want to let you know our next digital talk group net is coming up soon. It's going to be held on the 7th of March. Check out ICQPodcast.com for the times, and this one's going to be aimed at the North American time zone. So hopefully you'll be able to take part of a different group of listeners and hobbyists on the ICQ Podcast digital talk group there on the 7th of March. Right, well now we're going to join Martin, Dan, Caryn, Edmund and Ed to discuss and generate thoughts about the latest amateur radio news, including amateur tower victory and building Pedestrian-Bounce. As always, hope you enjoy.
Well, hi guys, and welcome to the ICQ Podcast, episode 477, and tonight's news roundtable for that episode. Tonight I'm joined by Mr. Dan Romanchik KB6NU. Hi Dan.
Hello, everyone.
Also, your side of the pond, Dan, we have Caryn Eve Murray KD2GUT. Hi, Caryn.
Hello, Martin. It is great to be back.
Yeah, good to hear you all. And as I say, I sent you funny as we just started, and I know you enjoyed it. So we're in good form today. My side of the pond, we have Mr. Edmund Spicer M0MNG. Hi, Edmund.
Hello, Martin. Hello, everybody.
And also, going over to Germany, we have Mr. Ed Durrant DD5LP. Hi, Ed.
Yeah, good evening, everybody.
Yeah, good to have you. So, let's start with and see what we've got going forward. Now, first news story, victory in Scotland for amateur radio tower installation. And I'm sure that a number of us have wanted to put up towers and all sorts of bits and pieces. And sometimes you have to fight the locals. There's planning regulations. Edmund, do you want to go first on this one?
Yeah, thank you, Martin. Well, I've had a look at this gentleman'sqrz.com page, and although there's a passing reference to this, there aren't any photographs, unfortunately. So it's a good news story, obviously, and I was very pleased to see that he had consulted or involved the RSGB. This is one of those things where the value of being a member of your national society can be demonstrated. It's one of those, isn't it? There are services that your national society often think you'll never need or call upon, but the services such as help with planning advice could end up being one of the things that you will really value from your membership, Martin.
Oh, yeah. There are things that we all need help with, and so this guy obviously had help from the RSGB, so that was good. Dan, any comments on this one?
Well, I'll just reiterate Edmund's comments there. This is one good reason to join your national association. In addition to lobbying for your behalf on putting up a tower, you might have RFI problems. And here in the U.S., the ARRL can certainly help you. So, I'll just put in another vote for that.
Yeah, that's a good vote in. And Caryn, I mean, you guys also have an extra problem with the homeowners association, and it's starting to develop a little bit over here. But I think if this guy was remote in your country, he wouldn't have so much problems with the tower, would he?
Well, no, but I should say the lesson here, which kind of cuts across borders and boundaries, the lesson is communication. Sometimes an initial rejection is a result of bad communication, and you should never be afraid to ask for help in getting your case made more clearly. So much is lost by people failing to communicate well and communicate and say what they mean to say. So just because you're rejected one time doesn't mean you can't go back a second time and make your case a bit more clearly. And that includes people. I've heard of cases where homeowners associations have been won over by clear communication and negotiation. So yeah, you can open the door if you try. You really can. So this is a story of hope and encouragement.
It certainly is. It certainly is. So that's a nice one to start with today, guys. Next news story. Well, it was a tragedy. Hams respond to a tragedy in the Chilean Andes. Now, unfortunately, the lady lost her life. I'm going to give it to you, Ed, first on this one because it's a massive undertaking these guys were on their trip, and ham radio did help a little bit, didn't it?
Yeah, but not through it being organised, more being through luck that one of the people on this extremely long horse ride that basically goes, from what I've understood, from one side of South America to the other, over the Andes. It just so happened that one of the people riding with this group, this horseback, well, marathon, I suppose you'd call it, was an amateur. And he was this Carlos Almirion, LU7DSY, had his radio with him and managed to get emergency communications through one club to another club and then get the people out after this woman had fallen from her horse on all the rocks. Unfortunately, as we've said, the end of the story was, despite the fact she was evacuated, I think, by helicopter, the time she died from her injuries in hospital, unfortunately. Yeah, it sounds from reading the story as if there were no plans for emergency communications. Now, there are other events, including one we'll be talking about a bit later in the show, where there's a lot of communication ready for such situations. And I think the more that local clubs or emergency services groups actually approach the organisers of such sporting events that are going to take place where there is no cell phone coverage, I think that's somewhere where amateur radio can do a lot of good. Unfortunately, in this particular case in Chile, hopefully they will learn from the mistake. That ride's been going on for 209 years, so it's not as if it's something new. So hopefully next year they'll have better communications and maybe have the ability then to get help to any injured riders a bit quicker. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, Ed, and I think you're right on that. There's a lot we could be doing, and if it's 200 years ago that it started, then it's quite surprising that there probably have been more tragedies, but a real shame, and our thoughts go out to the lady. Caryn, you are a horse person. I know you have a horse. Would this have been something you'd love to have done? Not die on the trail, obviously, but to do the trail and being an amateur, you'd have been a great use to them, wouldn't you?
I would have loved to have taken an HT and gone on a ride like this. Animals are, of course, even if it's your own horse, animals can be unpredictable. They can be frightened. We don't know exactly how this accident happened. And certainly the terrain up there is rocky and hilly and not the kind of terrain you want to land on if you fall off your horse. And this likely could not have been predicted. Whether her life could have been saved sooner if someone had been able to airlift her without the long wait, we don't know, because we don't know the nature of the injuries. But events like this are scheduled every year. This is a commemorative ride for the independence, the Army coming through the Andes, and the independence of the countries involved, including Chile. And there would need to be a more formal agreement for events such as this to have a more robust network for response. Now, I'm not saying there wasn't a network, because clearly there was. Clearly there was an emergency network that the hams engaged to get the helicopter there and to have ground support. But in general, I think the lesson here, quite apart from the tragic outcome, the lesson here is always assume the worst can happen, whatever kind of event it might be, where there is a more than likely chance of something horrible happening. Coming off your horse on a mountain ride is definitely not the same as someone taking a tumble off their horse in a show ring or on just on a ride in a field. So this probably points to a need for organizers of public events everywhere that involve a potential for greater peril than usual to make sure all of their plans are in place for quick response. I'm certain these people did their best. These hams, I know, had to have done their best, but sometimes things are going to happen. So people should just look at what they've got in place, what the blueprint is, and if they don't have one, get one.
Right, yeah. Well, as I say, it's a sorry story that the end income, but yeah, they've obviously been doing this for, 209 years, so it's a long time. Dan, what's your thoughts on this one?
Well, I'll just put in a plug here for what's called the Wilderness Protocol. And the Wilderness Protocol basically is a technique or procedure that we might use for calling for help when you're in a situation where you may not be near cell phone towers and such. And it's really, as was pointed out to me earlier, it's really not as popular as it probably should be. And like I say, I'll just put in a plug for it. And basically, what the idea is that you call for help at the top of the hour on the 2-meter simplex frequency. It's a little bit more involved than that, but and you'll want to do a little search for Wilderness Protocol to get the exact situation. But I would encourage anybody that's going to be in an area where there's no cell phone service to know what that is. And I also encourage other operators who are maybe near areas where there's no cell phone service to listen for people calling for help according to the Wilderness Protocol. It could save lives. And like I say, Google it to find out exactly what it is, and then be listening for people that might need help. And even in areas where you do have cell phone service, it might be useful if somebody has a phone that's the battery's dead in it, but they do have an HT with them, that it would be a good backup. So even if you live in a city, you might monitor the 2-meter simplex frequency, which here in the U.S. is 146.52. I'm not sure what it is in the UK or Germany, but if you listen to those frequencies, you kind of never know what you're going to hear.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, Dan. UK calling frequency for 2 meters, 145,500 over here. Interestingly, in Cyprus, they use 145,525. I sat on 145,500 calling for quite some time before I spotted them all up on 525. Edmund, what's your thoughts on this one?
Yes, I would echo the second half of what Dan said there. Within the last couple of years, I did hear somebody call for help on 2 meters. I mean, it wasn't a serious situation. They'd become separated from the group they were with and managed to get themselves a bit lost whilst out in the countryside or on a local hill. But in that location, there was excellent cell phone coverage. But this particular person, whilst they remembered to bring a handy talkie with them, they had left their mobile phone at home because they thought they were going to be with other people the whole time, therefore they wouldn't need to have a mobile phone with them. So, yep, can confirm the frequency 145500. That's pretty much standard across Europe, except that in some countries, France being one of them, for example, 145500 tends to be used purely for mobile calling rather than general calling, and you may find most of the activity 25 or 50 kilohertz above or below that frequency. But yes, other than that, I haven't got anything I can add really. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, well, I'd say it's an interesting one. Maybe, and we're not picking a fight with the organiser, it may be that going forward, maybe they should have a chat with us ham operators. That might help them. And maybe, just a maybe, some of the people going on these long trips might wish to know more about what we do and possibly get a license themselves. But that'd be a nice way. That'd be a nice way of generating extra people into the hobby. So, yeah, no problems at all on that one. Right, move to our next news story. Indiana BMV is now issuing amateur radio license plates. Caryn, you're not sure if this is such a good thing, are you?
Well, Indiana is redesigning the amateur radio license plates. New Hampshire has just moved ahead with a measure to issue amateur radio license plates. They're one of the few states that doesn't have one. I think they're beautiful. I love amateur radio license plates. I get excited when I see them on the road. Not every amateur radio license plate will have a person's call sign, but you can have your call sign on it. Here in New York, I see them everywhere. I get very excited until I realize, well, they don't know why I'm jumping up and down and waving because my car does not have my call sign on it, and I don't have an amateur radio license plate, even though I'm really proud of being a ham. But I worry about privacy and security. When I was a working newspaper reporter in New York City, when it was still possible to drive in New York City, I had press plates for my car, and so did press photographers. I didn't carry anything more technical than a notebook and a pen, but photographers carried very expensive equipment, and needless to say, putting NYP on your license plate made you a target for people who would look in your car uninvited, get some of that equipment, and relieve you of it, all the while shattering your windows and doing all sorts of nasty things to the inside of your car. So whether or not you have that equipment, they didn't ask you. They would just smash into your car and go looking. So those plates were a hazard to have, and I had that happen a few times. I don't know if somebody seeing an amateur radio plate wouldn't think the same thing, that there's an installation in there of some radio equipment. So I go back and forth on it, really. I would love to have my call sign on a plate, but again, it doesn't have to be an amateur radio plate, which would sort of defeat the purpose. But ask me on a Monday, and I'll give you a different answer on a Tuesday. I do go back and forth. I think for people who are proud and not not quite so paranoid as I am, it's a wonderful thing. But I don't know that it's for me. So I'll just leave it there. Back to you, Martin.
Well, you've given us a very good reason why you didn't want it from experience of your days in the press. So, it's understandable. Dan, would you think about having a ham radio license plate?
Well, to tell you the truth, I also do not have a ham radio license plate. And the main reason for that is I don't have a radio in the car. So if someone maybe spotted my license plate and said, hey, this is we need to get some communication, and they come to me, I wouldn't be able to help them. So that's the reason I don't do it. But for those guys who do have radio equipment, I think they're a great thing.
Yeah, well, I have radio equipment in my car, but I don't have any thing on the boot that says I'm an amateur. I suppose the biggest giveaway is the ARRL on the roof, but there you go. Edmund, I know you actually have, I believe, have your call sign on the rear door of your car, don't you?
Yes, but there's nothing there that explains what it is. So if somebody was driving behind me and saw the call sign, unless they knew what it was, they wouldn't know what it was, if you see what I mean. My first thought was the same as Karen's, but then my second thought was what you just said, Martin, that probably the ARRL on the roof would be the bigger giveaway than the license plate. And I can also see from Dan's point of view, this hasn't happened to me yet, but if the day ever arrives that somebody comes running up to me and says, I can see from the sticker on the back of your car that you're a radio amateur, I need you to use the radio equipment you've got inside the car to call for help or some such thing. And I then had to say truthfully, well, I'm sorry, I don't actually have any radio gear in my car. I'm not quite sure how the conversation would go after that or how I would feel about it. I do put mostly VHF and UHF gear rather than HF in the car when I'm going out somewhere specifically to use it, but then normally once that's all over, I take it out again, but then I've only got a relatively small car anyway. So yes, don't have any strong feelings on this one. And if I did have the option, the possibility of buying a number plate or paying for a number plate with my call sign on it, I would probably say bar humbug or words to that effect. I'm too mean to pay out for however much the exorbitant cost would undoubtedly come to, and I would just spend that money on radio gear instead, Martin. How about that?
Well, that's a valid point. That's a valid point, as you say. Ed, last words on this one?
Yeah, I think it's come out of this. We had discussions before about this, about the security issues, but I think the point is the reason we want a call sign on our number plate is so that other radio amateurs see it and acknowledge that we're there, rather than the general public. So a number plate that says, hey, look here, I'm a radio amateur, and yeah, this is my call sign, is going to attract or could attract people wanting to break in and steal equipment, as Karen has said. But a normal state plate with your call sign on it should not attract those people. People who just think, oh, it's a funny combination of letters and numbers. But to radio amateurs, it's, you would then be recognised. That's probably a good way around this. We come to the question of what it costs to get that, to get your car registration code changed to be your call sign, may well cost a lot of money in some countries, perhaps not in others. In any case, I also echo what was said, that if you have an antenna on the roof, that's more than likely going to attract people looking to break in as well. So, yeah. And also the fact that it's more and more difficult to actually operate radio mobile in many countries these days because of the police not knowing the difference between a smartphone and a radio. You know, so there's probably a lot less amateur radio operators operating mobile from the cars actually going down the road these days compared to, say, 30, 40 years ago. So, yeah, it's a way, I suppose the same way you could, rather than spending all the money on your car registration, you could just stick your QSL card in your back window That's going to cost you nothing. And of course, other amateurs seeing that would understand it. And again, the general public would not. Maybe that's a better solution. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, quite possibly. Now, I used to, and the biggest problem with leaving a handy-talkie or a walkie-talkie, as we call them this side of the pond, in your car, is most of the modern ones today don't have an on-off switch. Yes, they say they turn them off, but they drain the battery down. And I know that there's a lot of people that hate the Baofeng UV5R, but that always had a proper on-off switch. So you could leave it in the car as an emergency and pick it out 3 months later and it's still got a fully charged battery. So, yeah, just a thought, even if you think, well, I can leave a handheld device in the car, you're going to have to make sure the battery's charged pretty regularly. Which is probably defeats the object of leaving it in the car in the first place. But once again, good idea to carry something with you if you're going out somewhere. Probably more important. Okay, let's move to our next news story. Caryn, you put this one in again, and it says, not Moonbounce, rather building and pedestrian-bounce. And what you're talking about here is the driverless cars that are going around. Now, I know some will say they're very safe. Others won't. The child that got run over probably will say they're horrible things. But Caryn, we go first on this one.
Yeah, in theory, well, not in theory, I guess in practice, these devices utilize are radio signals. They bounce radio signals off of things to get the shape of what's ahead, and the car could have a better shot at not running someone over. This, again, being a driverless car. I don't think this is how cars with drivers work. I know even those cars, and I have one of them. If it detects something, it will slow the car down. I've actually disabled that feature on my car because I'm always looking, and I don't want my car to suddenly brake when I'm when I'm not the one causing it to break. That could cause problems too. I like to have situational awareness always when I'm on the road. But in this case, there's no driver, and so the car has to do, so to speak, its own thinking. And it bends, it lets the radio waves bounce and detect if something is there or even around the corner, because again, the signal will bounce and go in another direction. So it gives a better shape of what's ahead. If there's somebody, for instance, going around the corner and about to step into the street, the driverless car will not be that surprised. That's a wrong word. That's a human reaction, but you know what I'm saying. It will help anticipate the motion of the car. How do I feel about it? I love the science. I really love the science very, very much. What I don't love, what I don't love are driverless cars. Okay, that's just me and maybe a few other people. I know they're popular. I know they're considered safe, but I'm of a certain mindset with regard to driverless cars. But as I had said earlier when we were discussing this story, I'm also someone who owns and still uses, on occasion, a typewriter. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, no problems at all with that, Caryn. And yeah, you if you still use a typewriter as well, you'll have a lot of skills that other people won't have. So that's a good one. Dan, what's your thoughts on these driverless cars? Do you think they're safer or more dangerous?
Well, I think there have been some studies that show that driverless cars are actually safer than cars with drivers. I'll just leave that at that. My comment on this story, though, is that A, it's great that there's some research going on to make them even safer. And B, the fact that they're using radio waves is really probably a good way to generate some interest in amateur radio. I mean, because what do we do in amateur radio? We deal with radio waves and how radio waves behave. And if somebody has experience with amateur radio, they have a leg up on other people, researchers who don't have that experience. So going back to, which I love to do, going back to part 97.1, which sets out the purposes of amateur radio. This is a good, what you want to call it, excuse or reason to get an amateur radio license.
Yeah, certainly is, Dan. Certainly is. And we'll invite everybody in to the hobby that's interested in radio. Ed, what's your thoughts on this one?
Okay, technology behind this is that the current warning systems are based on LiDAR. LiDAR uses light pulses, not laser pulses, but light pulses, to sense distance by the reflected light. If there's a wall in the way, or if there's, as in this case, there was an SUV, a large four-wheel drive, where the child came out from behind and the driverless car didn't see them until the last minute and wasn't able to stop in time. The difference with the technology that's being developed, this story is about, is that it uses holo radar, which is, based on normal radar, in other words, radio signals. And it's the University of Pennsylvania that's working on this development. That, of course, could see through other vehicles and walls and everything else to at least see that there's something there. So in this particular case, the car might have slowed down a little bit, and then when the person or the child or the young person in this case actually walked out in front of the driverless car, maybe it would have stopped before hitting them. Whereas with LiDAR, it's line of sight. If there's no line of sight to the obstacle that's coming your way, then you're not going to see it. But with radar, with radio waves, they can penetrate and see that there is something coming and then prepare for it when it comes properly into view. So, yeah, good on the University of Pennsylvania working on this. Of course, it's one of these things that it's probably going to take a few years before it comes out. And by that time, I guess, we won't have any drivered cars in towns, at least, or in cities. It'll all be just nose-to-tail driverless cars with all the traffic, and in which case you might as well just put a train line in and everybody get into the train compartments. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, interesting thought about train lines. If ever you travel in London in a rush hour, Ed, the tube, the underground system, the trains just go down one station at a time. It's almost they shuffle down a train at each station. But no, I think this technology is great. I think there will be a few things that will come out and bite us, but great technology. Well, in fairness, they've had driverless trains in London on the Docklands Light Railway for at least 40 years. I shouldn't probably tell you, but a lot of the trains going through London, even though they have drivers on the trains, they go over onto automatic when they go through the central London, and they're controlled via the system. So this thing's happening all the time, guys. And I drive now, it's a 5-year-old Toyota, and it's got a lot of these some of these features on, and I joke and say the car is very easy to drive. You just point it in the right direction and you just play with the two pedals almost. It does everything else for you. However, the radar sensor on the back, it got me backing into a wall once by accident. I got sidetracked while I was reversing, and the car went, no, I ain't going to hit that wall, which is very, very good in my case. Equally, occasionally, if it gets worried, it'll come up brake on the dashboard with a bleep. Now, usually I'm thinking, why did it do that? But it obviously does. and intelligent radar, intelligent cruise control, where the radar controls your car. So if you're going out the motorway at say 70 miles an hour, and you come up behind somebody doing 50, my car drops down to a safe distance behind a car doing 50 at 50 miles an hour until I decide to overtake them, and then it will speed up again. So some of these technologies we've already got, and the more that develop, great. From my point of view, driving a hybrid car when it's on battery in a car park, people do not hear you coming, and they're wandering around. They're not paying any attention, or they're on their phone. They don't hear electric cars or hybrids when they're on battery. So some of these technologies I think are very, very good. So that's my feelings on this one. Okay, we talked a little bit earlier about safety and big events, and I am conscious of big events happening. Dan, the ham radio operators bridge up 200 communications. This is the big sled race up in the north of your country, isn't it? What do you think of this?
Right. So this dog sled race occurs in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. If you look at a map of Michigan, you'll see we have two different and separated by water, by the Great Lakes peninsulas. So this happens up in the Upper Peninsula. And in comparing this story to the story we talked about previously of the tragedy in the Andes, the big difference here is ham radio has been integrated into this race for many years. I don't know exactly how many years, but for many years. So this is an integral part of the UP 200. And because of that, the folks up there in the Upper Peninsula, who are really a hardy bunch to begin with, in fact, you might get a kick out of this. We here in the Lower Peninsula, we call those people the Upers, the Upper Peninsula residents, UP. Anyway, they've got this down, and they're ready to respond to anything that happens, and it really makes a big difference. Just like it says in the story here, in the past, teams have come up to me and thanked us for being out there, and it's really a good thing. So this is a great use of ham radio in my great state of Michigan, and that's all I got to say about it.
Well, you're right in that, it's a good thing that ham radio is involved, and if the organiser believes that ham radio should be involved. Okay. Ed, last words on this one?
Just to come back on what Dan said about his state migrating, is it migrating northwards to Canada?
Well, we border Canada. We have a very large border with Canada, right? It stretches all the way down here in Detroit, the Detroit area, all the way up to the Sioux Locks, which is northern Michigan. So we're really pretty well connected with Canada here.
Do they get weather that bad? But as you've just pointed out, you're out on the Canadian border, so the upper part of Michigan indeed is getting same kind of weather as in Canada, where indeed they do sled racing. So
for sure, up in the Upper Peninsula there, they get multiple feet of snow every winter.
Right.
So it's quite a thing up there.
Yeah.
And we were talking about cell phone coverage. A lot of the areas this route goes through, there is no cell phone coverage. It's right out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, but despite that, they've got systems in place, partially through amateur radio, so that you can actually watch it all happening on their website, where the things are, where the best viewing points are. But unfortunately for this year, people might be thinking of going to go and watch the UP 200. It was last Sunday it finished, so we just missed it. Unfortunately, the way the news story fell with the 2-week schedule of ICQ, but very well organised, a very good example of how amateur radio has been integrated, and it could be a very good model for other sports events for when an amateur radio group might want to approach the organisers of a sports event, they might want to use the UP200 as a good example.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think this is a good one. And this is a question for you, Dan. And in the UK, people who live up north or in Scotland refer to us, like Edmund and I, as southern softies because it's warmer down here. Do you have the same problem with the Upper Peninsula and the Lower Peninsula?
Well, I don't know. I've never talked to a Youper who will admit to having that terminology, but I wouldn't doubt it.
Yeah, just a little silly that I threw in at the end. So
yeah, you blooming southerners, you wimps, the lot of you.
Yeah, I know. But before I bite and say something I shouldn't, I'm going to say that's the news story.
I do know some people that are from the UP, so I'll have to ask them about that.
Yeah, just for a giggle, I wouldn't want to upset anybody, but just for a giggle, I often get called a southern softie by our northern colleagues, so I don't mind. There you go. Right, that's the end of our news stories. Let's find out what the guys have been up to since the last time we were on. Caryn, would you like to go first?
Yes, sure. Martin, I wish I could report to you that I went out and I did POTA, but we're still in a freeze on POTA, and that's freeze with a capital F because of the temperatures. So there's been only POTA chasing, which is fine, but there's nothing like going out in a park. So when you are sick of hearing me talk about POTA later on in the year, remember this moment, because there's no POTA for me. So what have I been doing instead? Well, Straight Key Century Club, just coming off of a Straight Key month, which was fabulous, a lot of fun. And Randomgram is this weekend, which is a great way to just keep your brain sharp on copy of randomly sent characters. It's like calisthenics for your brain. Concentrating on DXing a little more these days. I did get an all-time new one, which was just confirmed for me literally yesterday. The QSL manager for one of the stations in Kenya confirmed that I could check the log, and sure enough, there I was for CW contact on 20 meters with Kenya at 80 watts for me. I'm not exactly a powerhouse station. I can do 100, but I have found that I can do just as well with 80. And since you're not supposed to use more than you need to use, I'm using 80. 80 is working just fine for me. I entered, I guess, the 21st century or the 20th century. Finally got an account with Logbook of the World. I really had resisted it because I love QSL cards, but who says you can't have both? And I think it's a good idea, especially I'm involved in special event stations and organizing as well as participating in them. And I think it's a smart thing. I think it's a help to other people too who are looking for confirmed contacts in Logbook of the World. And guess what? I love it. I think it's kind of a cool thing. I like Logbook of the World. So I took advantage of the moment to upload my logs from the past, I guess 11 years, 10 or 11 years. It took a while, got everything uploaded because I wasn't always putting my contacts into software. I also have a notebook, so you can imagine how long that took. And applied for and got my Worked All States finally, and got my Worked All States CW, which makes me very happy. And I am closing in. on DXCC. This Kenya contact will move me a little bit closer. Now, I know a lot of people listening to this podcast are thinking, that's not really a big deal. A lot of people have this. No, that's true. But for me, it's a big deal because I work hard for each of my contacts, and I have a modest station And for me, it tells me that I can always improve on my skills as a listener and as a sender of code as well. I can always improve on my timing in pileups, because the little guy can bust a pileup if you're careful. And in fact, I did bust a rather big pileup just a couple of days ago, and I worked Whiskey 7 Pluto stroke 0, the Pluto anniversary, the 10th anniversary of the discovery of Pluto. This is a special event station that's running for 10 years, and I've worked it since 2021, every single year. And I love this special event. It's a lot of fun. I encourage people to give them support. And I worked them on sideband because I got to speak to the nephew of the astronomer who discovered Pluto. So that was a real kick. Really, really nice. And always good to dust off the microphone and use that. So yeah, it's been a busy time, but oh, I miss my POTA. I really miss my POTA. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, it does sound like you've been busy, though. And I know Frank K4FMH has just put up a big blog post about POTA and where the sites are and how many people have activated them and that sort of thing. It says with lots of graphs, so it might be an interesting read for you, Caryn. But say shows what's going on in POTA in the States. Dan, what have you been up to since last time we spoke?
Well, I tell you what, if I wasn't on the podcast today, this afternoon, I'd be out on POTA because it's like 60 degrees here and sunny. So it's great weather. The first really warm day we've had so far this year. But since I'm here, I'm no POTA for me today. Other than that, I've been updating my books. The tech question pool is changing in July. I need to upgrade my tech study guide. And also, a friend of mine has done a lot of research on Morse code learning method, Farnsworth and the Koch method and such. And I'm going to be incorporating his work into an update of my CW book. And I think that's going to make my CW book really good. So I've been working pretty hard on that. The way he wrote the chapters was a little bit academic, which is not the tone of my book. So I'm editing those chapters to make them more practical. But that's gonna turn out pretty well, I think. And the other thing I've been doing lately is here, the ARRL has an operating event this year to celebrate the 250th anniversary of the United States. They're calling it WAS 250, and they're allowing stations to use the W1AW call sign with a slash. Okay, so I did this just last night for the first time. I used the call sign W1AW/8, and if you work all states, work a W1AW in all the states, you can get this special certificate. But so I was W1AW/8 last night, and I made about 80 contacts on 40 meter CW. Well, no, I'll take that back. I made 102 contacts in about 80 minutes. So it was quite a pileup. It was quite interesting to be on the other side of a pileup like that. I don't think I've ever, I've worked special event stations and I've done field day, but this was probably the biggest pileup I've ever tried to work, and that was a lot of fun. I'll be on the air again tonight and a couple more nights. We get that call sign for a week here in Michigan. They move it around the different states. So I'll be W1AW/8 for the next week or so. So that's it. It's been a lot of fun doing that.
Well, it sounds like you've had fun, Dan. And Dan, I'm sorry, I'll take one for the team that I kept you indoors when it's lovely and sunny and you could have been out. Oh, sorry about that. And what I will say, though, is I remember the first time we spoke, you sent me a copy of your Morse book, and although I don't do Morse code, I can say it's a very, very good book, guys. Anybody wants to learn Morse.
Well, I tell you what, wait till I get the new one out. I'm going to try and have it done by May and have it at Dayton. But wait, if you really are interested in it, wait till May and then get the new edition.
Yeah. Well, I think if people do wait, Dan, I know your old book was good. This one can only be better, in fairness. Right. Edmund, what have you been up to since the last time we spoke?
Well, if you're listening to this on the day of release, Sunday, the 22nd of February, there are two things going on. One of them is Thinking Day on the air, and the other is 433 Alive in the UK. There may be slightly more Thinking Day on the air stations around this year, because the first Thinking Day took place in 1926, so this year is the centenary. And then in parallel to that, from midday till 3 p.m, roughly local time, 433 Alive is on the air. Again, vertical polarisation, with calling on 433.500 and then QSY. Well, in past editions, I've found all of the activity to have been between 433.4 and 433.6 at 25 kilohertz steps. So if you're taking part in that, it's not a contest, it's just talking to people and getting on the air and having fun, for the pleasure of it. But I've always found it a very enjoyable event. And if you're on HF, listen out for Thinking Day Girl Guide stations, and remember to make allowances for the youngsters who may be talking on the air for the first time. There'll probably be quite a few contest stations on the air because it's the SSB leg of the Coupe du Ref, the French national contest, taking place this weekend as well, if you want to practice your French a bit. The other thing that's going on is there's a bit of a push on the 145 Alive Facebook group to get people having simplex contacts on 2 meters every day, not just during the activity periods. And if you manage to have QSOs on 50 days out of 62 or something in the gap between now and the next event, then you can download a certificate or something along those lines. More details are on the Facebook group if you wanted to have a look. Only other thing that's going on is I'm still practicing CW more or less every day on the morsel.fun website, where 40 words per minute seems to be the order of the day. And although it doesn't feel like I'm making much progress, I think I am, because when we last spoke, if I listened to a 5-letter word at 40 words per minute, I'd be lucky if I copied one character the first time I heard it, whereas now I can normally do 2 or 3. I'm still tying my brain in knots though, but I've decided that 2026 is the year I'm really going to succeed at this, not least because later in the year I do plan to go portable. There's a particular location I have in mind which is not easy to reach in terms of driving there. The nearest car park is a fair distance away, so I would need to walk and lug radio gear from the car to the location I have in mind. And for that, I would be taking small batteries and QRP rigs rather than bigger batteries and 100-watt rigs. And obviously, if I'm going to be QRP, then the advantages of CW are well known. So I think that's the way to go. So slow and steady wins the race, I was told quite often when I was young. So I'm plugging away at it. I wouldn't say I've had a breakthrough yet, Dan and Caryn, but I am getting there slowly but surely. And if I can do it, so can you. Back to you, Martin.
Excellent news.
Yeah, sounds like you're having fun, mate.
Go for it. Yeah, go for it, Edmund. Go for it.
Go for it. Do it. That's a good one. Okay, Ed, what have you been up to?
Well, alongside my book writing and editing, I've done a couple of plotter activations, which listeners to this show will know that's my slang for poter from the car, because the weather hasn't been brilliant. But I've gone and done a couple, and last time I went out, actually, it's about a week ago, I think I got about 75 contacts in about 50 minutes. And that's on sideband on 20 metres, all around Europe. From, interestingly, a lot of them a lot closer than I'd normally be able to get, because we'd just had a CME hit. So even though people say, well, that's bad radio conditions because you're not getting the DX, yeah, there's the other side of the coin. It can bring in stations closer to you than you normally would talk to. So that was actually quite enjoyable. Okay, yeah. The main thing has been taking my time, though, is a low pass filter. For those who don't know, that's the part of a transmitter circuit that stops harmonics coming off the final amplifier stage. Rather than designing my own for my 30-watt portable amplifier, I decided to buy the, XF-LPF HF unit from China. It's available as a kit already built, and it's actually a good design. However, here's a bit of a public information message. While the kit is fine, the pre-built units are not. And why is that? Well, instead of a 1500 picofarad capacitor at one point, the robot that builds these boards has put a 150 picofarad in. And 4 of the 8 toroids have the wrong numbers of turns on them. What it means is that these 4 switched filters are not on the expected frequencies, and on some bands, the primary frequency that's being transmitted from the amplifier is actually being blocked, not the harmonic frequencies. And so I'm getting up to about 10 dB of attenuation happening through the board. Yeah, I thought this can't be the case. I thought it must be amplifier problem and all the rest of it. Because, you buy something built, you expect it to be working. Looking on the internet, I eventually came across Rudy Imprek's article. He's ON7IR, and he found out 3 years ago about these problems with this board and documented it online. But it seems they still they've made tens of thousands of these boards and they're still selling the faulty boards, or the same assembly errors are still happening on new boards that are being put together. A little bit annoying, but also educational project. I've managed to rewind the toroids, and just today I've replaced the capacitor because I had to order a new one in the board. So tomorrow I'll be sweeping the filters using my Nano VNA. And I'm hoping that now the frequencies of the filters are somewhere where they should be. I do wonder, however, how many other hams have not realised the reason why their home-built amplifier or transmitter is down on output when they're using one of these pre-built boards. So, some of the listeners, if you are using that board and you're wondering why the output's down, do a search on the article from ON7IR, and then check your board. It could be the same problem he has and I have with mine. And you'll need to do some soldering and some part changes. But yeah, a bit of construction work while I haven't been able to get out so much portable because of the weather. And yeah, that's about it from me, Martin. Back to you.
Well, it sounds like you've been having fun anyway, Ed. So, yeah, that's a good one. Right, from my point of view, and I'm going to mention this, Ed, although you said we could talk about this offline. I applied to the ARDC for their plus 44 net to get an IP address. My support ticket has now been sitting 10 days without a reply to the question I've asked. Could be my fault, as Ed has already told me. But, if you've got a support system that's looking at tickets, I would expect to get something back. So, Ed, I will take you up on the offer. We'll chat about this offline at some point in time in the very near future. On the kit front, okay, I put this in an email to Caryn, and she said, "You silly old fool," anyway, because the best thing is the human being. But I bought from China one of these Morse code decoders. So you plug it into your radio, and you plug the speaker in the other side, and it's got an LCD display, and it ripples through, and it should tell you what's being sent. It also has got a place where you can put a key on it to practice your sending. Now, I was just curious. Let's be honest, I'm curious because I don't do Morse. Let me tell you, this whole thing is about as useful as a chocolate fireguard. It's a device that's got a 16-character 2-line display on it, so you'll spot them on the internet. They show you them coming with a case thing to put it together and all the hardware. When they ship it to you, you don't get the case and that. You just get the bare board. Well, okay, I was just playing. It didn't cost a lot of money. I'm like you with wrong components. I built this. One of the capacitors was missing in the kit. But resistors, I got twice as many resistors as I needed. But one of the capacitors was missing, which was a real pain. Okay, I had one in my junk box, and as we all have junk boxes, but then once I got it working, I think I wasted another capacitor. The thing is horrible. So, buyer beware from Chinese kits. As Caryn said, you can probably decode better in your own head than anything that's designed to do this. So you're dead right, Caryn, on that one. We did do the ICQ project talk group a couple of weeks ago where we were online on our talk group. 13 people joined us. A couple of people joined from the States, but we weren't expecting the States because most people would be in bed at the time we were actually on. Had a couple from New Zealand, and there were more than just me as an ICQ presenter on. The next one happens, I think it's on our website, but the first Saturday of the month. So look out for that. It's a bit later in the day, UTC, which means that it's sort of breakfast time onwards for people in the States. So we're hoping we can, bring some people on from the States. But that doesn't stop other parts of the world joining if you really, really want to. The more, the merrier. But say we had 13 on the first go. Yeah, like always, I've been doing 2 meters and 70 sems most of the time. A little bit on the talk group, not as much as I'd like to. My major problem over this week last couple of weeks, has been computer problems. I've had a horrible time with computers. I just think they hate me and decide they're going to fall over and die and various bits and pieces. But I think I'm 99% through that problem now, so we'll move on. And as Edmund said, 433 Alive is on the Sunday that this podcast releases, and I may go out and do this. Last time Edmund and I went out when it was a bit warmer, we went to Epsom Downs. I think we had 33 contacts on 70 Sems FM Simplex on an afternoon, which is absolutely phenomenal for 70 Sems. So, and effectively we were just running off my antenna on top of the car. So we didn't even have a mega antenna up. So that's what I've been up to. And more work to come. I've got other things going on in the background, which I'll tell you when they come to fruition. So all that's left for me to do now is thank the guys for turning up, and we'll move to the next part of the podcast. I'd like to thank Mr. Dan Romanchik KB6NU.
Well, my pleasure as always.
Yeah, great to have you as always, Dan. I'd also like to thank Caryn Eve Murray KD2GUT.
It's been wonderful, especially you're mentioning Morse code. So hope lives in my heart, Martin. Thanks for a great podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for turning up. And, in some ways, I just built this kit for something to do, but I chose Morse in it anyway, so you never know. I'd also like to thank Mr. Edmund Spicer M0MNG.
Thanks for having me on, Martin.
No problems at all, mate. And also, Mr. Ed Durrant over there in Germany, DD5LP. Nice to have you, Ed.
Yep, thanks a lot, and thanks for the invite, and it's always nice to take part.
Yeah, I enjoy our chats. Right, guys, I'm going to say 73, so we'll move to the next part of the podcast. 73 all.
73.
Keep your amateur ham radio podcast advert free by donating less than a length of coax. Visit www.iccpodcast.com/donate now. For all the news, links and information, visit www.iccpodcast.com.
It's time to have a look at the news in brief from me, Colin M6BOY. We start with news. The ARRL is looking for their clubs to participate in the second annual Ham Radio Open House event in April. And this is an idea to give clubs and schools the opportunity to promote amateur radio science and technology by opening up their stations to the public and showcasing their high-tech gear and operating skills. In addition as well, clubs are encouraged to set up in public spaces like POTA, Parks on the Air, and activations with satellite operation demonstrations, etc. So there's lots of information on this on the ARRL's webpage about how you can get involved, all the modes, all the technologies, etc. Really just open up amateur radio to the wider community, as I say there. So we'll put a link to this for you on the ICQ Podcast webpage so you can take part on this event on the 18th of April. Got a couple of bits of news here in the software world. First off, we have a radio software competition open for nominations. This is for open source projects, and submissions are available to be accepted until the end of February, so you need to act fast to get in for that one. And then there's a construction competition in the UK, say to get involved in as well, which say can either be physical constructions or with software, or the combination of both. From there, that is being run in conjunction with the RSGB in the UK. And again, deadline for entry to that is the 1st of March. So if you're a constructor, software writer, etc., and you can submit for both of those competitions, so find more information for that on the ICQ Podcast webpage. And we finish off with news that Ofcom has approved an application from Telefonica UK to request a variation to its license to allow it to provide satellite connectivity to standard mobile phones in the UK. It's the first license variation of its kind to be approved by Ofcom, who made their final decision to support the rollout of new services powered by direct-to-device technology. And this technology involves satellites in space beaming down signals to smartphones on Earth, enabling people to stay connected in coverage, not spots or black spots as we would call them, including hard-to-reach rural areas and mountainous regions. So interesting there. Those regulations will come into effect on the 25th of February, so in a few days' time. So they're first of its kind in the UK. Right, now we head up to our features episode where we take a look at the changes affecting the ARRL's bylaw number 46, and most importantly as well, I suppose, to examine these changes and also to think about how they may apply to associations around the world if they were to adopt such a measure. As always, hope you enjoy.
And now for this episode's feature from the ICQ Podcast.
Hello, everybody. This is Frank, K4FMH, for the ICQ Podcast. And tonight we have a real treat. I've got two fellow presenters here with me. Up from the land that time forgot, he says, Bill Barnes in Western Pennsylvania. Hey, Bill.
Hey, I'm actually in Eastern Pennsylvania. It just looks like I'm in Western Pennsylvania because of the mountains.
Well,
And that's the valley that time forgot.
you'll have to forgive me. I'm only a GIS expert. How do I know where you are? Listen, Bill, I don't know.
I'm to the left of the Appalachian Trail. Go north.
I'm hearing there's some noise on the line, Bill. I don't know if you hear it or not, but it's a regular pattern. It sounds like Morse code. It must be Dan, the CWG KB6NU. Hey, Dan.
How's it going, Frank?
It's going well. We have a special guest tonight, a fellow ham who's also an attorney, But more importantly, he's also been a director for the American Radio Relay League for, I think, a decade or so. Bob Familio, K3RF. Welcome, Bob.
Pleasure to be here, Frank. Glad to be with you and looking forward to a robust discussion tonight.
Well, very good. We try on the podcast to cover news. Some of it is pleasant, uplifting, and hip, hip, hooray, and that kind of thing. And sometimes it's not quite as pleasant. And what I want to talk about among us tonight is your recent withdrawal. And I'll use that term with them for you to correct it. From the board. I want to give our listeners a little bit of an overview from a layperson, that is a rank and file ham's perspective, and Bob will let you correct it. The American Radio Relay League is over, 100 years old or so. It's a nonprofit corporation in the state of Connecticut. They also are blessed with the federal designation of a nonprofit under the 501c3 federal regs by the Internal Revenue Service. Kind of important to realize they're a state corporation, and then they get some tax relief from the feds, in this case, the IRS. So recently, we've covered stories about a struggle to change bylaws and change rules and regulations and things of that nature. And one of the most controversial changes focused on Bylaw 46. It was finally enacted by the board, put into place by ARRL Incorporated. I want to underscore that to our listeners. Let's remember, there's a corporation acting here that is managed by a chief executive officer and an elected president, elected by the board, not by the members. There are members of the board of directors who are one by one division directors. You become a division director by election of members in your division, then you have a seat on the board. Now, there's where the rub arises, as I see it as a layperson. This Bylaw 46, like most corporate law, you have some responsibilities as a member of the board of directors. And in this case, we're a membership-driven organization. I happen to be a life member of the ARRL. So what are their responsibilities? Well, there are a number of them. A fancy word called fiduciary responsibility to operate in the best interest of the corporation. Corporation set up to provide services and act on behalf of members. Okay, that makes sense, right? You join a group, you elect a board member, they're going to look out for you, right? Well, here's where Bylaw 46 and the interpretation used by the ARRL gets real sticky. There's the notion that once you take a seat on that board, your loyalty's not really for the member's best interest, but for the corporation's best interest. Who speaks for the corporation publicly? Let's see, it's a secretary who is elected. In this case, it happens to be the chief executive officer. How do we get a chief executive officer? Back in a bygone era, we had a long-term leader named Dave Sumner, and toward the end of his term, he said, folks, I'm like the Rolling Stones. I can't get no respect, and I just can't get any satisfaction on the Hill in Congress with the title of a general manager. Why don't you make my position chief executive officer? Okay, Dave, whatever you say. So that happened years ago. But what difference did it make? Well, when Dave retired, then what was the league looking for? Not a general manager, as his title used to be, but a chief executive officer. Where do you find those? You don't find them in the nonprofit world as much as you do in the for-profit world. So then we had 3 now chief executive officers that all came from the for-profit world. And each one, in various and sundry ways, has looked at the management of Newington and ARRL Inc. as the CEO and secretary a little differently than maybe Dave Sumner did and those who would be general managers. Now, that's one element of this. Bylaw 46, as implemented by corporate management, the CEO, developed this form that you had to acknowledge and agree to follow certain principles, which kind of sort of, I'm told, my board member that I elected can't tell me what's going on. We understand employment things. We understand there's some things that should be private. if I were an employee and I got into trouble and I was being reviewed and I might come out clean, I don't want my name smeared out there. No one would. There are certain things I think most members could understand, but everything is going to be secret now, except if the secretary releases it. Now, our guest tonight, as I read in his public release, was given a form to sign to acknowledge and agree to these principles of whose loyalty does he have to have in this fiduciary responsibility, and he decided he couldn't sign it. And so he was removed from the board. He didn't resign, but was removed from the board. Quite a real, as they say in the Star Wars universe, there's a great disturbance in the force. So now, Bob, correct me, no ego involved here. That's kind of a common everyday understanding of what may have gone on. But tell our listeners what version of that's correct.
Well, you're generally correct. That's a pretty good summary, and particularly the history of the general manager versus the CEO. Actually, the board had decided as an aside that the new title was going to be executive director, and somehow it didn't get implemented when they hired, I guess 4 years ago, Dave Minster. He continues to use the title CEO, and he will tell you that means he's in charge of or responsible for the business of the league. But let me go back to your actual question. It wasn't Dave Minster, the CEO, who implemented this, although his fingerprints are all over it. Now, he's not here to argue with me, unfortunately, because I would like to debate that. He would tell you, since he's not here, he would tell you that I just report to the board. That's technically true, but in reality, he's a powerful figure. I think in one of your blogs last year, you had written something about those dynamics. That was pretty good.
Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, when I went to Newington, I've been on the board, by the way, for since 2014. I was section manager for several terms for Eastern Pennsylvania, and I was asked. Somebody suggested was there going to be a vacancy? Why don't you run for vice director? And I did that and won. It was a three-way race between three different section managers throughout Atlantic. And I thought, I'm off to see the wizard. And I was gone the yellow brick road to Newington. It actually was exciting for me because when I was a 13-year-old ham radio operator, took the test when I was 12, I wouldn't have dreamed this. But what I found, Frank, is that I found the man behind the curtain. I was really surprised after my first year or two as a vice director. I went to every meeting, never missed one in 12 years. Well, actually, there was a year I took a vacation. You know about that because I had been disqualified. And we probably won't have time to get into that this evening, but I had sent you some documents about that. Most members don't know that this kind of funny business behind the closed doors has been going on for some years. It wasn't just me. They eliminate people. They won't let them stand for election. They'll come up with ways to provide for that. They would vigorously defend that, and I'd love to be on a stage to debate them. That will never happen. So back to your question. The actual new rules have been in the oven for about 2 years. You probably know that. You probably heard some complaining before. I was one of them. We had other directors, and you know some of them. There's 3, 4, sometimes 5 directors that are for what we have or what members have called over the last 2 to 4 years, the transparency party. Not something we cooked up, but that's what the masses come up with. And the other one is the confidentiality party. Cute names, but that's descriptive of what's happened. So my point is that they being the majority party, what has recently been called the shadow board, another one of your blogs that I really liked. I forget when that was, but last year. They came up with, well, we've got to get this under control and get these.
Only the shadow knows.
There you go.
Of us old enough to remember old time radio.
Yeah, I like that. People should go look at that because it really explains everything that started this. And the shadow board, the confidentiality party, whatever you want to call them, said we got to get this under control. We can't have people like Dick Norton or Bob Familio, John Stratton, Mickey Baker. For all kinds of people that actually prefer to be able to tell their members who elected them and who we are responsible for under Connecticut law, tell them what's happening. With the caveat that you raised, Frank, I've been a lawyer 47 years and I'm a corporate lawyer. I have a private practice, but I represent a lot of small corporations, small and medium-sized corporations, even one that is publicly traded as a special counsel for certain matters, technology matters and patent law. I'm also a patent attorney as a certification. So it is, I kind of understand how things go. And I will tell you that in Connecticut, you touched on this, Frank, there are two types of nonprofits. Membership corporations, that's a statutory form. It's actually in the law because they're treated separately. And non-membership. Most charities that many people watching or members of the ARRL know are not necessarily membership corporations. Most nonprofit corporations have boards that are selected. I've been on those. Many members that have written to me, ARRL members, have been on those and say, well, you've got to keep things in the corporation. Once you're appointed, that you owe your duty to the corporation. And I don't quarrel with that because there's no members. You do, but you have beneficiaries, but they don't elect you. And if they don't like you, it's too bad. The other directors can elect you or get you out at their whim. Membership corporations, not only in Connecticut, but in most states, because it's a uniform law, by the way. The corporation law in Connecticut looks identical to Pennsylvania and many of the other states in which I'm licensed to practice law upon bar exams. I've got a number of them. But they are the same, and it is really clear, and it could not be clearer, that in a membership corporation, the duty of an elected member of the board of directors is to keep the members informed and at their good faith belief on what they're doing serves the members. And the members are the corporation. We'll get to that in a little bit because they're not separate entities in that regard. But that the members are served. I'm responsible to the members, and I need to be able to tell them what our policies are, what the CEO's 5-year plan for our ARRL, that's confidential, it's written across every page. You've never seen it, I'm assuming. And it's the type of thing that there is no good reason that the members should not be informed about what our finances are, that we are going to eliminate QST, something I voted against twice because I tried to reinstate it. I won't go off in those weeds. But those are the kinds of things that I see as a breach of my fiduciary duty, my duty to the members, and every other elected director's duty to the members of canceling that for those that had paid money in advance. Well, heck, they said, we're going to lose $1 million. We can't do that. We could have afforded to do it and not do something else. It was more important, in my view, that we serve the members and take lick our chops and raise dues, tell them why, but not do it in secret, not do it after the fact that I've already paid. That's just one example, by the way. And I use that example because I get a lot of pushback for that.
That's been the hot button. I think Bill and Dan, would you two agree that's been probably the hot button that you've run into?
I think that's the one that touches most members.
That's just an example, too. There's a lot of other things like that. And we're spending money on the wrong things. But people ask me, they want to know what goes on in that meeting. Tonight, while we're taping this, the minutes came out from the meeting, my last meeting in January, just a few weeks ago, before they kicked my butt out the door illegally, without my consent. And under Connecticut law, I'm still the director, but I'm not going to go there. We did all kinds of things. And you read the minutes, and it doesn't tell you anything. And I'm here to tell you, gentlemen, and the listeners, that if you read those minutes, and you've been in that meeting, you're thinking, this got to be the wrong date. We met for 2 days, and the minutes really, and this is typical, it's not just recently, but they really don't say much. And a lot of things in there have been an executive session. You'll see that when we have people out of the room, they're talking about salaries and things and whether we have to give our CEO a raise and other things like that.
Bob, let me hold up. But Dan, you've written about the sort of sanitized minutes, haven't you?
Well, I may have, but I'm in total agreement with Bob. They really say nothing anymore. Back maybe 5 years ago or more, they certainly were a lot more descriptive, and they've gotten to be like nothing now. And it's not only the minutes, it's the agendas. The agendas say, oh, we're just going to basically all get together and talk. It doesn't say what topics they're going to discuss. So again, members have no idea what they're going to discuss, so they don't email their directors and say, hey, look, we want you to talk about this, or this is how we feel about that.
All right. Well, circling back, Frank, to your question, it was the board that decided finally, and they have a committee. by the way, that was to come up with a new ethics rule. And there was no reason, by the way, for we needed new ethics rules. They were fine. We had conflict of interest statements each January, which I thought were fine and were necessary, and that we would sign for years and years. I'd been there, my first gotten on the board 2014, and they were fine. And you have to submit them every year. And when you run for office, you have to submit them. And mine were typically 3 or 4 pages, because I think as a lawyer, that's what you've got to do. Most of my colleagues on the board had 1 paragraph. You know, I don't sell ham equipment except at Hamfest, and that's it. I think as a lawyer, I understand what conflict of interest statements should have, and mine were awfully long. And I thought that's appropriate, is my point. Now, I think they came up with a 150-page bylaw 46, and I'll explain that, because the bylaw itself is only a couple of pages, but it incorporates by reference. And allow me to back up. It was just passed this past July. After about 2 years or 3 years of haggling, of taking it off the table, we pointed out all kinds of serious mistakes, and I had to change them. And of course, they needed 12 votes to do that, because you need 30 days in advance of a submission of a bylaw change. You could do it with 10 votes. And if you see the minutes over the last couple of years, all these things were 10-5. You'll find that. But they finally passed it in July, and it incorporates by reference. Now, people have said that the new statement called I call it the oath. They originally called it an oath. And some people, even some I don't like on the board, said that won't go over well. So they changed it to the director's statement of obedience, responsibility. I'm taking that out of order, but it sounds something like that. Well, that sounds okay. And it's several pages. But if you read it carefully, it incorporates, and I've got a list here, I won't go through it, but it incorporates all kinds of things, rules and regulations that are written by the staff, standing orders, a director workbook, which is over 100 and some pages. And you are incorporating that as a requirement that you have allegiance to those rules and regulations, which are ambiguous. They're poorly drafted, and they're not these various documents that they incorporate by reference into a shorter bylaw and into the statement says that the person signing that statement is promising to do all those things and to be bound by the new rules of how they get rid of you. Those new rules are contrary to the simple Connecticut law that says, essentially, and I won't bore you with the actual technicality of how it reads, but it says in simple terms, actually, removal of directors by members. If a director is elected by a class of members, wait for it, only the members of that class, the people that elected me, may participate in a vote to remove him. And the way the ARRL has for years, it had proper bylaws that said, if you want to remove a director, you only need 10% of the voting members in Atlantic or any other division who voted in the last election. That's typically less than all the members, by the way,
right?
Unless there's no election. But they just signed a petition, and you got to do it within three months. That's plenty of time. Sign a petition, and if you have 10% of the members, let's say 4,000 people voted, you only need 400 signatures. You can put that up for a vote by the members. It's mandatory. And that is really the rub. That's probably the hub, gentlemen, of what the complaint about the illegality of this new bylaw. And I'll get to what their own lawyer said to me in a little bit, not to jump ahead, because even the lawyers didn't review that. Even though the committee, it's Art Ziegelbaum, Director Ziegelbaum, and 2 others, and some others actually had a bunch of help to do this, had told me and everybody else that it's been approved by council and that it's okay and it's legal and all that. That turned out to be completely, entirely incorrect, which even shocked me, because I thought they were going to start an argument. If I were their lawyer, I'd come up with something that would fit the smile test, is what we call it.
Bob, was that the legal counsel that is sort of the standing legal counsel for the league, or was that a different attorney?
That is the attorney, the law firm that the CEO hired to represent us. We didn't pick it. I didn't pick it. Maybe the executive committee approved it. But they represent the league, although in the past, the one lawyer they had from a large firm, the CEO says, it's got to be a good firm. It's the second biggest in Hartford. And that tells me right away, as a practicing lawyer for 48 years now, that's not the firm you want to be with. You want to be with a specialty boutique firm with 10 or 20 lawyers that only practice nonprofit law. And there's at least 2 of those at least 2 in Hartford, and they're very good, by the way. I met with one. And they would tell you the same thing I'm telling you. But the point here is that they came up with this new law to, in a fashion that is contradictory. There's a white paper that's tough to get through because it's very scholarly. It's the one that Fred Hopengarden, K1VR, he's of antenna zoning fame for lawyers. Very good lawyer, Harvard graduate, smart guy, fair. He did a long, I guess it was 11 pages, a white paper that's wonderful, but it's too long. Hams won't read it, I assume. But it's really a scholarly work, which means that this is what the lawyers for the league should have been doing to try to convince people that the nonsense that they passed is actually legal and will stand up to challenge. They told me it probably wouldn't. When they answered my questions I had for 12 minutes, I was allowed in July, this past July, 12 minutes to ask them questions.
So you have an attorney who had been a member of the board of directors, someone Fred Hopengarden, who had been a guest on the podcast in a previous interview that we published, who has some expertise, is also a ham, very well known. So he has some expertise. He did pro bono work for giving the league a white paper.
Right.
And then they turned a deaf ear by virtue of a legal firm that doesn't have clear and direct expertise in the area. Am I hearing that right?
Well, they have some expertise in the area. They're a big general firm. And, if you got 150 lawyers, somebody's got to know something about something. So I'm not saying that, but they're not specialists in the field. But my point is, they're not specialists, but they know. The lawyer that I spoke with, I was surprised at her honesty and her answers, which proved what I complained about is actually the case. And that is, again, to review for a moment, is I was told for a year or so that the lawyers say we have to do this. We have to do it for 501c3 maintenance. I asked her that. She says, no, we were not asked to review that at all. Silence in the room. I said, well, was this legal? Is this contrary to, have you been asked to review this for the legality and whether it would stand up the test in a court? No, she said. And this is a new lawyer that was different than the one that we've had for the first couple of years from the same firm. Because no, we were not asked to do that. What were you asked to do? We were asked whether it would be legal to pass this bylaw. And even I would agree with her, you could pass it. But you see how that avoids the question. I actually was impressed with her because she was being honest, giving lawyerly answers, and wasn't making up stuff. I was ready to have some serious debate. I wouldn't have been given the time to do that. But I was really pleased. I even told Minster this out in the hall afterwards. I said, I like her. My actual words. And when he watches this, he'll remember that.
Hey, Bob, hold on just a second. We're here with the ICQ podcast. We're interviewing Bob Familio, K3RF, recently deposed, I guess is one word that could be used, a member of the board of directors. That is, he didn't resign, but he was offered the door because he wouldn't sign an oath. And with Bill WC3B and Dan KB6NU. Let's do this. Bill, what does this sound like to you?
It sounds more of kind of the things we've been hearing before about, basically an internal board political structure where you got folks that want the, share with the members and folks that want to have stuff confidential and concealed. It's actually quite alarming. I actually did vote for Bob one time when I was a member of the league. And I felt he, in all these years, you've done a great job representing the Atlantic Division.
Thank you.
It's very disturbing to me that basically just throwing people off the board for not signing a recently passed, after being bumped for years, guidelines that reference documents they can go change at any time.
Right. The lawyer also told me when I asked, who did you speak with? Did you speak with the chairman of the committee, which is our international vice president, W6ROD, Rod Stafford. Used to be president many years ago. He's our international vice president. Great guy, retired judge, a criminal judge. He'd be the first to tell you he's never tried a case dealing with Sybil, but a smart guy, critical thinker. I said, did you speak with him? Not at all. Wait. You didn't speak with the chairman at all over the last year? No. Who did you speak with? Art Ziegelbaum is a director who's is the one that's behind this. And I've had some serious arguments with him in the past.
Now, what's his background? He
is a geologist. He has a very interesting background, geology. He's got a PhD in geology and hard science. It's a good thing. I respect that. I like rocks. Not trying to be smartass, but part of my language. But it's a good science. But he had told me, because I've asked him, we've tried to be friends. That's not happening because I frankly, I'm a little troubled by him pushing this.
So he's not an attorney. He's
not
a physical scientist, not an attorney. And so the person who's a former judge, years of experience, was not consulted in favor of a geologist who is the current chair of the committee. Just wanted to get that straight.
Yeah, actually, that's right. Rod Stafford was the chairman of this committee, I believe. Yes, he was actually, and he was never consulted and had no discussions with the lawyer. Art was the driving force. He's one of the members of the committee and was the chairman of another committee that related. This has been going on for a while, and I lost track of who's doing what to who and why. But Art told me when I asked him, he said, I'm on a nonprofit, and I believe him. He says, I'm the only non-lawyer on a board that's all lawyers for a social justice nonprofit associated with a synagogue. And I think that's fine. I think that's great. But it's the kind of thing where you get appointed. It doesn't have members and so forth. And so I know all about nonprofit law because all my colleagues on that board are lawyers. Okay.
Well,
say that somebody in the press too, I guess.
You know about what's come up before that nonprofit board. And I dare say, having done remote sensing myself and worked with NASA and done land use, land cover, and all those good geological things, that you wouldn't take one rock and generalize what the Earth's core is about, and therefore you wouldn't do here. Dan, what does this sound like to you? You're active in your division in that you get around, talk to people. You're known for writing, not just your blog, but for your license manual guides and things like that. But what does this sound like to you, just as a member?
Well, like I've written in the past, I just think all this stuff is not good for ham radio and not good for the league both. And I think it's borne out. I mean, we still see the membership dropping, and I mean the members can see through this. They say, man, why should we send them our $60 a year if they're going to do stuff like this?
We're blessed tonight to have Bob with us. He is an attorney. He is an actor in the piece here, if you will. And because rank and file members, they hear this, that, and the other legal, this. Look, I just want my stuff. Right. As Bob said, I want my QST, my logbook of the world, and I don't know about all that stuff. Now, we'll pick back up. I wanted to get co-presenters, their view. We're the cheap seats, okay? And we all yell at the referee, right? But at the same time, we want to watch the game. So let's go back to the game. And Bob, pick up there. So you've had the chair of a committee to hear this, didn't go to the senior person, former judge, et cetera, but only talked to the current chair who's a geologist.
Yeah, and he had other people too. I don't think the lawyer told me, because I asked her, I said, who did you speak with? She said, I only spoke with the, Director Ziegelbaum. Okay. And I said, who? No, I only spoke with him. He was my contact person. Well, okay. That may be much ado about nothing if that's all that happened. But it's surprising to me that I was told by Art and others that the lawyers said we have to do this. The lawyers have approved this. I mean, I've got it in writing some places. In fact, on the ARRL site, you'll see that these have been approved by opinion of counsel. There is no opinion of counsel. It is a 2-page memorandum unsigned that doesn't have any footnotes, case references, or quotes as any scholarly work from a lawyer. That's what I do for a living for decades, and I write opinions for clients or for courts. Those are argumentative memorandums, but that's what you do. You have a proposition, and you support it and you reference it, just like Fred Hopengarden did. A lot of people tried to get through this 11 pages, and it says, sounds like a lawyer wrote it. And I said, that's the point. So we didn't get an opinion of counsel as it says It also says, and this is something I must mention, on the website ARRL where there's questions and answers, is likely to be held up in court. The answer is deceptive. It says that someone at the firm had asked someone at the Attorney General's office about whether they would bring an action against the league because of this. And they said it's not likely. Well, I agree with that. And the reason is they don't do that. I deal administrative law, a big part of my practice with the FAA, with the Commerce Department, and state agencies as well. Right now, I'm doing that with the Attorney General's office in New Jersey for something unrelated with ham radio. And they don't give out advisory opinions. And moreover, they don't bring an action. What they tell you is, unless there's fraud, somebody stealing money, it's different. That's not what we're talking about here. But if complaints go to them, and some people, by the way, have complained to them, in elegant emails that really set forth a concise statement of what the problem is and why they want the Attorney General's office to get involved with the ARRL. I saw some of those. They were well worded so that they don't waste the attorney's time and it gets past the first person looking at it. They don't even answer, and they won't. And if you press them on it, they'll say, that's a civil matter. Please bring it to court. They're not involved. They will be involved. There was money being stolen, misused, public monies, things of that sort. But they are not the 911 for this kind of stuff. They're not the enforcers. And yet what it says on our website is deceptive. People believe, well, if you don't complain to the civil authorities, I saw something on social media somebody sent me, that all I got to do is call the troops in, call the Attorney General, and they'll straighten it out. Oh, but if that were just true, I would love that.
You know, I've heard it explained by an assistant AG here in Mississippi that I work with on software law. I was the administrator for all of the universities, public universities, the college board. I was their software administrator. And the guy said, Frank, you don't call 911 for the weather, and you don't call the Attorney General's office for legal advice. Call a lawyer.
Right. Well put. And so you see, it's deceptive. A lot of our members will see that as well. Okay, if they said it's okay, if the Attorney General says it's okay, it must be. Of course, they didn't say it's okay. And I can tell you as a fact, definitively, that it's not okay. The law is very clear. Only the members that voted for that person. Now, to jump ahead, what's the procedure now, or what at least the league says, the lawyer actually didn't provide this advice, even though I was told they did, is that it's okay because we are not violating that law that only the members can remove. We're not removing you. If you've read some of their stuff, we are judging you ineligible to serve. Now, there's a number of lawyers throughout the country that are life members of the league or hams. One of them that I sent you that was particularly eloquent from a real expert, top guy in an Atlanta firm that does just nonprofit litigation. I forget his call sign, but it's well circulated. Really nailed it. K4EAK. I spoke with him by email, and respected lawyer. And he wrote to the whole board. They ignored it. They didn't answer it. They just sort of poo-pooed it. You and the horse you rode in on. He said the same thing. He said, it's not fooling anybody. Just by making it someone ineligible because they didn't sign this, cannot violate the statute in Connecticut that says only the directors can remove the one that, through the procedure that exists, the one that they elected. And it's not that hard to do. You can have a recall. It's pretty easy. So the problem is, and I asked the lawyer this in that 12 minutes that I had, I said, will this stand in court? Because, well, we've never had a court decision in Connecticut. And a lawyer would say, that's because it's clear, right? There's no one's going to test it. But okay, I think that's what the league management and the confidentiality party is banking on, that they can do this without getting into trouble because their interpretation has the sound of reasonableness. It really doesn't to a lawyer. You can't change the title, the name of removal to ineligibility. And that's what that gentleman I spoke of, that's what his email very clearly and concisely points out. But when I asked her, before they blew the whistle on me, Rick Roderick got the hook. Said, Bob, you're done. And nobody else had anything to say, so I don't know why I didn't have more.
Now, Rick is also an attorney. Yes,
he is. He's a good one, too. He's a good one, too. He's there's some issues with political issues, but we're just a microcosm of society at the league anyway. So you can figure how these things filter down into society today. But it was interesting because the lawyer said, I said, are there any other state laws that we could look to? Because that's what you do. If you don't have a case in Connecticut, you look to authoritative law around the country. And Delaware is looked to for corporate law because they've got some specialty courts that just do corporate interpretation. And they're well respected. They had a case that dealing with something like this. And she said, yeah, in Delaware law, and I quoted the case because I'd done my homework, said we'd probably, might be overturned. She was soft-soaping it, but she said it was accurate. Yeah, if it was wonderful what she said. Yeah, if it has the effect of removing a director and violating the intent of the statute, it's likely going to fail. I said, well, how long would that take in court here in Connecticut? 1 year? She goes, no, probably 2. All right, I agree with her. Superior Court. How much would it cost? $100,000? She goes, oh no, much more than that. See, their philosophy, no, seriously, there's a real answer. And so you see what happens. It's a good way to get away with something like this because no one is going to contest that.
You're caught in a practical breach. You're wrong, but can't be proven wrong for practical reason. Let me share this, because I want to reach our listeners. I talk with 3 corporate attorneys, 2 of whom are hams here in Mississippi. Each one said, look, I don't know Connecticut law, but there's 2 things I would ask. One, the smell test says that this is, and one literally said a bastardization. I assume that's a astute legal term, Bob. A bastardization of Connecticut law in favor of management control. That was number 1. Number 2, this corporate tax attorney said, Frank, have you talked to any other nonprofits in Connecticut? And do they have, for membership-driven ones, do they have these issues? And I said, I've not. But I wonder, Bob, have you had any interaction with any other? Because it's the same Connecticut law, right? It would apply to, are there other nonprofits in Connecticut that?
There must be, but I've been unable to find any of them that have, and they have published ethics rules are pretty short, the conflict of interest. ARRL's had one for decades that has worked just fine. People should ask, why do they need this? No other nonprofit in a lot of states, I don't know about Connecticut because I only could see what I could see on their website and they don't have it. There may be somebody that does. I doubt it because it's not necessary. And we have not had a problem. This is a bad solution looking for a problem. The real reason they're doing this is to keep things secret. They don't want you to know what's happening. They don't, we're hemorrhaging members. And you wrote another blog, I think, about that more than a year ago now.
Yeah.
And our membership numbers, they don't want you to know that, but I've learned recently it's even less than you think. You know the number. What number do we have now, roughly? It shouldn't be a secret.
Well, it's about, it depends on who you ask, but about 120,000. But it's important to know that a good share of that 20,000 above 100 are associate members and international members, neither of whom who vote. And you can make a value judgment and say, are they real members? Well, yeah, they're members. They're classed as a member, but they're not like voting ham operator type members. So it's probably brushing 100,000 or
a little more than that, but not
a little more than that, but close enough to round it off to that.
We're losing 1,000 a month, give or take. Now that's supposed to be secret. Why should that be secret? And we could use that. I mean, members are leaving for a reason. And if we had a whole better approach and took good care of our membership and did things that are really necessary for them, we get members back. In fact, for a while, do you remember what was Howard Mickle?
Yeah.
We actually started getting members to come back.
A very small uptick when Howard was the CEO. And economists say you got to have 3 periods to make a trend, otherwise it's just kind of a random thing. But it was clearly there. Dan,
he arrested the downward.
Right. Dan, weigh in a little bit on this because this is something you have written articles about from your experience from Rotary Club International and some others about setting standards for membership targets, right?
Well, that's what I've been trying to get the ARRL to do forever is say, well, look, we should set a membership goal, and because if you don't set a goal, you'll never do it, improve at all, right? At least that's my opinion. And I've approached them time and time again about it, and of course they never reply to me. And I'm just flummoxed by this because they can try and run the ARRL however they want, right? I mean, they're in there now and they're pretty well entrenched, but it's certainly not going to be good for the ARRL, and it's not going to be good for ham radio because, as you say, we're just hemorrhaging members right and left. And I talk to lots of people, and they say, "Oh, screw them. I'm not gonna renew this year, and anymore." And it's just a bad situation all the way around.
We need a strong ARRL. Nobody on this call probably doubts that. I'm a life member, and I've been a member. It'd be 58 years now, I think. Yeah, a long time. 1967, I joined this, and I've been a member. Now, the problem is that we're getting away from what we ought to be doing and spending a lot of money on things that are interesting, like STEM and scholarships and things. But I would argue, in kind of closing here, that our most important thing is spectrum protection, antenna rights, whether it's HOA or otherwise. PRB 1 is all but dissolved by the Supreme Court. And the third thing is RFI pollution. Those seem like simple things, but isn't that the core requirement to keep our activities healthy? And there's all these other things that are great. Contests, and the magazine is pretty good. I love On the Air magazine. I think Becky does a really great job with that. But we've gotten away from all that, and we're trying to model the ARRL like it's a business. Like, how do we make more money? How do we save money by reducing services to the members, by making them pay for QST when they've already paid for it? I wasn't against raising the dues, by the way. We probably should have done $1 a year or something way back. Dick Norton made that argument and didn't go anywhere. That was 10 years ago, more than that. But to do it all, I was okay with $10 a year. I said maybe 15. People would be mad at me. But when people pay something for 2 or 3 years of QST and we take it away from them, it's not so much the money, although for some people it is. They don't trust us anymore. It just
that's where trust gets bludgeoned is on that. Bill, you are in IT, and I don't know if you currently are housed in a library, but you're there intimately involved with the library at your university. And I'm sure you can testify at what periodical costs are in their escalation each year. So comment about that vis-a-vis what libraries are paying to get periodicals and things versus what QST experience has been on what it costs.
Well, so we get print periodicals, very few of them now. Most of them are electronic, and even bundled, because one of the things that we get is a lot of academic periodicals bundled together by discipline. They're going up anywhere between 7 to 13% every year. And the last time I looked at it, the last time I looked at it was probably 2024, because I had other budgets I had to worry about the last couple of years. But it's been that way for at least a decade.
And Elsevier, which is a major international publisher, has kind of led the charge on rapid escalation with that. And here's where I think it's relevant. The rest of the publishing world is inching, if not running, toward digital as a cost reduction. So the notion that QST is going to have to go digital because of print costs, the color paper has truly gone up. I'm from a county in Georgia, Washington County, that for many years was known as the kaolin capital of the world, and that's what they glazed paper with. Brazil discovered a mother lode about 15 years ago, and that's changed a little bit. So I know from literally the ground up at the escalation of color print paper costs. So when Minster talked about that, I called my high school basketball buddy who was director of international sales for one of the major kaolin companies. And Randy said, "Oh yeah, Frank, we're shipping all we can produce and competing with Brazil. And it's just absolutely astronomical. So I'll give Minster his due on that one. I think he was correct. But Bob, to the extent that the ARRL made some members of, say, I'm a baby boomer, of the baby boom group I'm in, they want their print magazine, and you'll take it out of my cold dead fingers. And so I get that. But the rest of the world is also moving to digital for a cost savings. But you hit on it, Bob. From what I talk to people about, it's the promise you made, and then the board, as I understand it, had a study that no one could ever produce that talked about how much money was involved. Did I get bad intel on that?
No, you didn't. But don't get me talking. It'll take another hour. We don't have. I was the one that asked Director Kimmerer, who did the report, about we would lose, 500-600 members. That seemed a little light. And I asked him, I remember this. It was an open session. I said, you have a report? Yes, I have a report. Now let's step through these next moments very carefully. I said, may I see it? He said, it's proprietary. And I said, I have to vote in 10 minutes. And I almost spoke with that kind of, impolite voice. I need to see it. Well, I'll send you a copy. Well, he didn't. And it turns out I don't think it existed.
So let's make sure our readers understand this.
Right.
So you're on a board. You're not paid. You're reimbursed for travel and lodging maybe, but you're not paid. And you do some work on behalf of that board, but you claim it's proprietary?
That's what he told me. I was there. And I do a lot of intellectual property in my practice, almost half. Trademarks, copyright, patents, technology law, all that kind of stuff. I know what proprietary stuff is. So I get your point.
That's unheard of from my vantage point. Now, Fred Kimmerer, I think it's Fred, he's the same one who supposedly did a study quoted by the president in the annual report about most technicians aren't active after a year or 2 years or some fantastic.
I'm not sure if it was him, but they made that statement, and frankly, I don't know what the basis of that is.
Well, it was him, and I'll tell you why. Because, of course, being a statistician, I go, wow, hey, Mr. President, Rick, can I get a copy of that study? It's in your official annual report.
Right.
And he goes, well, CEO has that. Okay, so get CEO, and I finally get the response, well, there really wasn't any study. You'll have to ask Kimmerer. I asked Kimmerer. He says, I don't have anything. He was off the board by then. My point is echoing what you're saying, that there's this internal pattern of behavior among some board members that not only do you not reveal things outside the board, one faction won't reveal it to another faction on the board. Am I wrong?
That's absolutely right. And that's why you get what I had characterized as the shadow board. They meet and we never know what they're doing. They make decisions without us, which technically is legal, by the way, but it's not ethical. There's two different things. So they say, well, we have a caucus of the majority. You see that in Congress, by the way.
Yeah.
Same thing. We're a microcosm. And that's what's been happening. And they said, it's a waste of time to talk to you guys. You just got to moan and groan and give us a hard time. I said, I just want to know. I agree on some of the things that the board does. You'll see votes where I agree with the majority on things, but some of those are less important than the things we're talking about tonight. But back to that one vote on the number of members, that cost us because we ended up losing like 12,000 members or something. There was numbers thrown around. And the money that we thought we would save by not making print available to those that paid for it, unless you pay extra, we still make it. And I agree with you about electronic, by the way. But the money we lost by that miscalculation was consumed. This is my understanding from a number of sources inside, that I talked to. The money that we lost from losing those members consumed any of that $1 million savings over the 3 years that they thought it would be. I am of the opinion we work for the members. The league is our league, not theirs. If it was a closed board and not a membership corporation. And to sum up, the members, even though it was going to cost us, and that was our fault being the board of directors, because this has been pending for years. We don't talk about dues increase. People don't want to get voted off. But we could have done $1 a year, told people we really need it and why, and I'll bet you our members would say, well, okay. And we would have been able to avoid some of this. We shoot ourselves in the foot all the time. We're always we're behind the curve, so to speak, as an engineer would say. We're behind that power curve. So there you are.
This clearly seems to me to be a sad day. Bill, Dan, you guys got follow-up questions here?
No, not really a follow-up question, but thank you very much for your service. And thank you, Bob, for really, standing up, making this situation, public. Because realistically, you could have just signed, you could have just went along.
A lot of my colleagues did, and I can't name some of them. They had to even run this last summer. Otherwise, you wouldn't hear from them, and their story won't be told. They're in there. They can't talk to me anymore, and they actually don't. Our vice director, who I picked sometime before because the other one had resigned, Marty, the first Marty, because he didn't like what was going on. I picked somebody else who I think is going to do us justice. He can't talk to me. He doesn't call me. I don't take that. He had to sign to run or to be accepted. Otherwise, nobody would get on there, and then the president would get to pick somebody. And I can tell you Atlantic Division is in good hands. He's a graduate engineer from Carnegie Mellon, has a master's degree in business administration from the University of Pittsburgh. He's a chairman of a bank in Western Pennsylvania and owns a very large construction company, does government buildings. And he's a man of integrity and been a ham for years and years and has the same likes and dislikes as I do. He's not a lawyer, but he could be. And he is looking out for our interest. I'll never know what goes on in there. It's all secret. But at least he will be there raising his voice. And he ought to be running the A&F committee. They just picked a new chairman that doesn't have any background in any of this for the accounting and finance. And they have people on the board that are well experienced, highly educated, and great active hams that will never get those positions because they have similar likes and dislikes about the membership and the league, the things we talked about, and therefore will always be marginalized. The people on the board, folks, like their red badge, and that really what they like the position. They like having an all-expense paid vacation to Hartford twice a year, or even more sometimes. And I think that's what drives them. I'm wondering, why did they do this? Why can't we all get along? It's politics, just like you see on the TV set every night, that's making us shut off that boob tube and go listen to 75 meters.
Bob, I'll share a microcosm of that. I used to be the vice director for Mississippi for the Southeastern Repeater Association. And I went to the annual meeting. They had in the bylaws, you have to have 2 meetings of the board twice a year. I'm thinking, wow, okay. And it was in Dollywood. And so I go there and I see all these grandkids running around and all this, and it hit me. Okay, they put this in the bylaws so they could use Sarah money to have vacations for grandchildren. So the second meeting I went to, I humbly raised this issue. And it was like quiet. Nobody said anything. So I thought, well, okay. So the third meeting that I was scheduled to go to, I had developed some eye pressure, precursor to glaucoma, and thought they may have to drain the tube, may have to have surgery, so I didn't go. And since I wasn't there, they just voted me off the board. So, Bob, we have a shared experience, much bigger scale on your end, okay? So, listen, Bill's going to drop for us, and Bill, thank you for being here. Dan, you want to follow up with any questions?
Yeah. So my question would be is, going forward, I'll put it bluntly, is there any hope?
Well, I'll answer that. For the first time in my life of ARRL membership, and it's been a lot of years, I'm actually concerned that the league is going to become ineffective if it's not already in 2 or 3 years, maybe 5 years. And that scares me because there's nothing else. There's no competitors, really. It may be because of social media and the ability to bootstrap good organizations that can be specialists within a certain aspect of our advocation. Maybe they'll be effective. I think there ought to be a separate organization for advocacy for spectrum protection because I know what's going on. We talk about it. You don't see it much. in board minutes, but we have some real challenges to spectrum. Spectrum space is valued in the billions.
Yeah.
And we have a lot of frequencies up high that we're starting to use now. You can even buy equipment from ICOM that goes...
What with the high-speed trading, is one clear and present.
HF, that's right. And they're spending a lot of money, and the administration of Washington's pro-business. That's not a secret. They're pro-business. Sell everything, make money from it. If you sell frequencies, you sell 902 to 928, one of our bands, where they want to put 5G cell phones. The money they would make from an auction or selling it to the people that are spending a lot of money trying to do that would pay for the national debt for about 6 weeks. And then you're done. We have high frequencies. So I'm a big believer that we need a strong voice. ARRL is capable of that, but they're not going to do it because of the politics that I don't think now are going to go away. There's going to be no quick fix. And I'm sorry to say that the members have something to say about this. They don't know that they can make a difference by running for office or encouraging their colleagues who are hams that they think would make a good director to run. A lot of people with qualifications and backgrounds don't want any of this, and that's what happens. And so you get people to run and nobody else runs against them, or when they do, they get disqualified. We haven't talked about Bylaw 18, and I won't get started tonight, but it's much more difficult. We call it the Incumbent Protection Act.
Well, right.
I think Dan wrote about that. Did you?
Yeah, I've written about that.
Nobody can run.
I just think that the whole thing's just ridiculous. It's totally ridiculous. That's why, people ask me a lot, should I join the league? And I almost have to tell them no. What, like you're just throwing your money away in a way,
Yeah.
No, you talk about QST, for example. Well, yeah, it's not bad. But, now there are several free alternatives for a technical magazine that are just as good or better than QST.
Yeah, I don't know what to say about that. That's what my dilemma is. For the first time, to circle back to that question, I don't know whether the league's going to make it. I hope it does. There are some good people on the panel, on the board. They're going to be eliminated too, one way or another, because we didn't talk about the real meat of the rules, but suffice to say that anything you do can be determined to be hurtful to the league. Just like what I talked about tonight. If I was on the board, they said, you violated the ethics code. What you said hurt us. It's that simple. And that's just one example of all the nonsense that's in that 100 and some pages. That, by the way, they still have to correct. Turns out even Mickey Baker, not to go off on a tangent, but Director Baker had a really good question about why they had to rewrite the director's workbook that's already passed as being a rule you have to sign, but it's not completed yet. He said, it's been a year, you push this through, and yet you're telling us it's not ready for prime time, but we've all agreed we have to abide by it. You can't make this stuff up.
Yes. Bob, we'll have you back again because clearly there's more going on here. But as we begin to close here, let me mention, you had, as a result of what happened to you, you had one of your section managers resign, did you not?
Yes, and he resigned loudly. And it was an eloquent, they made him take down what he put on the Eastern Pennsylvania website. He didn't send it to the section, he put it on the website and sent the same similar pointed letter to Rick Roderick, to the CEO, the first vice president. He had been our section manager for many years. He's in Eastern Pennsylvania, so I know him. He's a man of integrity. I think, did you read his then eloquent, loud sign-off that, and I was touched. You guys, if Bob Familio isn't ethical enough or something like that to be a director, then neither am I as section manager. And by the way, let me give you a scoop, gentlemen. Section managers are going to be required to sign an oath as well. Oops, did I say that? That was secret. That shouldn't have been. It's already passed. I was in a committee meeting and they passed that. Now they have to write it to match section managers because the director's oath talks about other things. The section manager has a section manager workbook, but they'd like to get rid of some section managers. So they also voted in. I voted against it. This is the ECFSC, but it passed. There also allows the field service manager to fire any elected section manager with or without cause. that was, we won't do it without cause because we can't get section managers anymore. But that's it. Well, then you should put in for cause. But they don't want to do it.
This is the canard that voting for a section manager so they can take marching orders from somebody in Newington. I mean, people think they're up there fighting a good fight for me. They're my section manager. No, you're picking somebody if you can get them. Now, let me say this. This will be out by the time this feature is included in one of our podcasts. But this afternoon, I resigned as assistant director of the Delta Division after about 12 years under two directors. And I published my letter on my blog, and those that bother to read that I believe the letter stands on its own. But this change was sort of the last, I don't want to say straw, but that's a good metaphor, that I'm still a life member of the league, and I still care about the league. But what is going on in the administration of this major organization, over a century old, for this hobby we all love, I could not see me doing anything that would be of benefit. So I published that, and at the end of it, I put a little picture of the old Keep On Trucking from the 60s thing, and that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to keep on trucking. I just won't be, as I like to say, a volunteer flunky, a division.
That's essentially great. That's essentially what I was. Now, I'll promise the listeners and all of you gentlemen that I am going to continue to support amateur radio. Amateur radio is a way of life for me. It is responsible, and I blame it for my success. And that's a whole nother show. It's true too, by the way. So you'll hear
you and me both, by the way.
Members will hear that I'm active in some things that will probably, get some publicity. I've got a lot of calls from people say, we'd like to talk to you. More active with the IEEE's MOVE, Emergency Communications Group, that I was interested in before. They approached me, and I said, well, I'm the Aries chairman. I can't do that. It's not really a conflict because we're all in it together for Emergency Communications. And I just didn't have time to do all these things. I was also chairman of the Legal Defense Committee for several years. So you'll hear from me, and I know all you gentlemen are active in amateur radio, and that ARRL, well, we'll see what happens. My fingers are crossed.
Bob, listen, and I'll say this to our listeners, Dan and Bill, who had to check out here. Some people will hear us saying critical things. They'll go, only good ARRL should be spoken. Well, really, are you a good steward of an organization if it's all sweetness and light? Now, we've all experienced the gadfly, but Dan and I have been a bit outspoken in that we have written what we see as honest facts and verifiable statements to bring it to the attention of listeners who are members, who are maybe members in the future, and who are former members. And this is done in the spirit of trying to make the American Radio Relay League here in the US of A better organization by pointing out when it's doing things that just don't pass the smell test and don't pass kind of the legal paper test. So, Bob, we'd like to have you back again if you're willing.
Let me know when and where, and I will be there. And I agree with everything you just said, by the way. The ARRL, the league belongs to us, and so we need to make it strong, but I'm not sure now how to do that, given all the things we've talked about tonight.
Well, unfortunately, sometimes a crash requires a rebuild, and if there is any silver lining in the decline of numbers, maybe that will bring things. But we will say 73 from the ICQ podcast. Dan, I'll let you sign us off.
All right. 7-3, everyone, and get out there and get on the air.
See you on the radio.
See you on the radio.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Well, everybody, I really hope you enjoyed our feature this episode. I know it's a little bit of a long one, but a very important discussion in relation to the rule changes. Whilst it's focused on the ARRL, it's always very important to understand what happens in these national organisations, because obviously while today it might not affect the one in your region, it's important to understand how this could affect other regions around the world as you listen. So hopefully everybody got something from it. As I say, and really thanks there to our colleagues for producing that feature this episode. So thanks a lot for that. Dan, it's certainly a very interesting feature and enlightening. I know we've been chatting about it all week, and it's the sort of thing that's triggering off lots of ideas in our heads, maybe for some future ideas and features as well for us to discuss the general governance of the hobby going forward. So, as I say, it's a good one to start the brain matter thinking about the way our hobby might direct in the future.
Yeah, certainly, Colin. It's, as you say, it's predominantly American because we're talking about the ARRL, but this could happen in your area, as Colin said, because the national societies do see what each other national society is doing and kind of pass information backwards and forwards. So it's an interesting one. I think it's important that's not technical, but it's important that we bring these things to you as they surface, Colin.
Yep, no, I certainly do agree with you there. So, guys, we really look forward to your feedback you may have on this episode. So drop us a line from the usual channels, either on the Facebook group for our Twitter handles, or obviously by contact us via the Contact Us page on the ICQ Podcast webpage. It will be great to hear your views. Now, talking about hearing your views, etc., we'd like to promote that our next Digital Talk Group Net is going to be on the 7th of March of this year, obviously. So go to ICQPodcast.com to find out the times for that event. I believe that one's more for North America. So as I say, we'll be shifting those time zones around to pick up different time zones and different listeners, etc. So look out for that show on the 7th of March. So we'll be looking forward to speaking to you then. Of course, we'd like to thank the guys taking part in the news round table. Many thanks, guys, for your opinions, etc. So we really do appreciate that there. And we'd also like to thank as well our monthly subscription donors for helping us out, supporting us, and showing their value for the ICQ podcast. If you found value from today's episode, please do consider supporting us by going to ICQPodcast.com/donate. And I say everything you send our way to show your value goes to supporting your ICQ podcast, paying our way our bills, and most importantly for us, keeping us advert-free and independent to bring you shows like today's. Right, well, I think that just about wraps up episode 477 of the ICQ podcast. Obviously, the last most important thing to do is to have a hunt around that cupboard, Dan. Hopefully you've been shopping this week, found Mrs. B a treat, and as I say, make her a nice cup of tea because she must be getting up soon.
Yeah, we certainly will, Colin. And say, yes, there's some goodies in the cupboard. So we'll say 73s to all our listeners while I go off and make Mrs. B a cup of tea.
Wonderful. Well, 73s all. We'll catch you on a fortnight time. 73s.
Yeah, 73.